What's poppin'? We are here today. We're doing some talk show stuff.
Ready to connect. Click connect to show now. Thank you for calling Truth Wanted. You may listen to the show while waiting. A beeping noise will indicate when you are on with the host.
And I am going to, most of what I do is being there for people who are leaving the faith or doubting. So there is going to be more focus on Christianity. On the other side, my relationship with the religion is a little complicated because I'm opposed to a lot of the ideas of the.
Hi, thank you for calling Truth Wanted. Please be advised if the host takes your call will be recorded for broadcast. Who am I speaking with?
Brant Gill.
Okay. Did you want to just go by Brant?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay, perfect. And are you atheist or theist?
Atheist.
Okay. And what, if any, pronouns would you like for us to list for you?
He, him is fine.
Okay. And then where are you calling from?
Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Okay. And what did you want to talk about tonight?
The one guest is talking about conspiracies right now, so I wanted to talk about Thomas Ligotti's conspiracy against the human race, which is about existential dread and how people try to be quiet about uncomfortable topics like atheism, existential dread, pain, suffering, and all these other topics that are negative.
Right. Okay. Okay. All right. Perfect. Well, I will get you in the queue then, Brant. Once I've got you into the queue, you're going to hear the show through this line here. So just make sure you keep YouTube muted in the background and be ready to go live at any moment.
Awesome.
When you hear the beep, you'll be on the air with the host. Just don't ask if they can hear you. Just assume they can. They'll let you know if they can't. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
You have been put in the holding queue. A beeping noise will indicate when you are on with the host.
Childhood, we were told that
Dave.
no pain, no gain. You have to work hard to gain a reward. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you want to become, like employee of the month, you have to work hard. In every aspect of life, you have to work hard to gain reward. Christianity says that you don't have to work hard. You're not justified by your good works. So even the people who, like put their hands on oath, take an oath on the Holy Bible, they don't even accept the idea that. That's why at the beginning of the call, I said that Republicans are not Christians, because Republicans are the most, it is a party that says that you have to work hard or you just have to die kind of stuff. And that is against the idea of Christianity, because Christianity.
The thing is, your interpretation of Christianity is one of many interpretations of Christianity. I mean, like many people have died over their interpretations of Christianity from other people who have called themselves Christians, right? Like this is just a debate that it will never end. I don't know if we can honestly say this is the one true Christianity. Let's say that you have access to exactly what Jesus thought and exactly what he meant and everything that he preached. Does it actually matter? Because if more Christians are saying, no, this is what Christianity is, I mean, I'm going to listen to what they have to say, right? Like that is at least one version of Christianity. Maybe it's not the ultimate truth, but it doesn't matter. It's still a popular idea and it's still a very influential one. So our criticism of that is still worthy, even if it's not the true Christianity, right? But I don't know that people have access to exactly what Jesus' intentions were, or Paul's intentions were, or any of the writers of the gospel, right? All we have are human interpretation. And so as long as we live in a world where human interpretation is going to be the arbiter between what we know as true Christianity versus anything else, it's all going to be a pointless discussion anyway, right? So I'm just going to listen to what people say and how people describe themselves as Christians and then take it from there. I don't have any skin in the game anymore by saying, oh, this is the real Christianity. That doesn't matter. What matters is, okay, if this Christian construct is harming people, I'm going to talk about it and tell you why that's wrong, why we shouldn't live in a society that should support that. But
what harms do you think that Christianity has done? Because I know that it's like a propaganda that you have to pull out right there. It's like, oh, Christianity is really harmful, but I don't see any harms to it. Like, I mean, I could only see the benefits. So what is the harm of Christianity?
We don't have time.
But I mean, can I try to give a broad strokes answer?
Yeah, give a broad strokes.
Yeah, you could go all day back and forth about whether Christianity causes harm or not and evaluate different specific actions across history and stuff. But I think if I were to give the quickest answer is that it suggests ideas of morality based on divine dictate, basically based on a book, based on people's impressions of what God wants. And it says that alone is good reason to decide how people should act. And it includes motivations based on undemonstrated claims about the supernatural. And so I can't claim that always, or even most of the time, leads people to do bad things, but it throws a level of randomness into the process that I think is dangerous, if not always directly harmful. So if I were to try to give a short answer, that would be the best I could do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think every time you say an action is good or bad, it should be based on the demonstrable effects of that action and not on somebody claiming that they know what God wants.
Yeah.
And as soon as that last part enters into the conversation, we're off the rails and there's at least a potential of danger.
Absolutely. All right. Any final thoughts on Worthy Servant before we wrap up this call?
Well, thank you for listening to me, you guys. I hope that we will have a very good conversation in the future. Dan, we have spoke before, but thank you for taking my calls. Have a good night.
No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will say, I recognize the caller's voice. Obviously, folks, I'm going to use the name that people say they want to use, and that's what I do. But listen, if you've called into the show before and you've listened to this and other programs, we talk about the harms of Christianity like all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like how people have been harmed by it. Like it's just, I don't know how you don't know, right? Like I don't even want to go into examples because we do it literally every week. So I don't know. I would say listen to other people, listen to when they tell their stories and see how it could be harmful. Really think about it because it's there. But anyway, that's all the time we got for that call. Zod, before we move on, I have to talk about some things. First of all, once again, we are accepting super chats and we will read them live on the air. So feel free to send us something, and assuming they're YouTube appropriate, we'll give it a read. Of course, you can donate by going to our Patreon. You can also support the show by becoming a member, though. If you do become a member, you get emojis in the chat, your name gets highlighted, and you'll be immune to the slow mode. And you can do that for as little as 99 cents a month. So you should definitely check that out. I'm also going to do this plug as well. We have a limited edition t-shirt that is really great. It's feeling cute today. Might destroy the universe. Might adopt the cat. IDK. I love it. It's a good shirt. It's the last chance to get this shirt because next month we're gonna get a different shirt. So as soon as July ends, we'll have another exclusive shirt for the next month. And that's just how we do things. And of course, we have our other Truth Wanted merch in the store. So check that out if you want to support the show. And lastly, before I move on, if you want to listen to audio-only versions of the show, there is a way to do that. You can go to tiny.cc/AEN podcast. For all the latest ACA shows, we have a huge number of listeners that just listen to audio, which is cool. I'm glad that people can still enjoy the show, even if they're not watching my dumb face or Zod's handsome face. By the way, it's, we don't encourage people commenting about people's appearances, but Zod is, I hope I look like Zod when I get to Zod's age, because Zod, you're a handsome man. Did you know that? You're a very good looking guy.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Yes. And with that comment out of the way, I think it's time for some other calls. You ready to keep going, Zod?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's keep going. This should be an interesting one. We have Quarlo. Tell me if I'm saying that incorrectly, but Quarlo calling in from Texas. You are live on Truth Wanted. Quarlo, how can we help?
Quarlo.
Hey, Dan. Hey, Zod. Good evening, gentlemen. I hope you're doing well. And yes, Zod is a very handsome man. And listen, Zod, I'm so sorry about that whole Kal-El thing. I was rooting for you, man. I was rooting for you.
Look at that.
At the end of the movie. Well, it's been a fun week for the UFO people. They are. I've been all over the. Yeah. I've been.
Yeah, they're talking about fucking
a lot of
UFOs.
comments, and what I wanted to call about was it's almost religious. The people who are sure that we've been visited, it's almost like a religious conviction. And I'm a skeptic, so I suggest that, well, evidence would be nice. Evidence would be really good. But if you even suggest that life in this galaxy, technologically advanced intelligent life, might be rare, people get angry. They come at you. Oh, you're just not looking at how many stars there are, and you're just crazy. There's so much evidence. No, there's not very much evidence. So I wish skeptics would be a little more skeptical. And believe me, I grew up. I'm an old fart. I grew up on all those great old shows. I would love it if there was other alien life, but I'm not going to let that wish bias my examination of the evidence.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And look, we live in the internet age, right? We have more access to information than ever before, but that also means we have a lot of access to really bad information, right? And I think that this is where some of this is stemming from. We're also living in a time where there's conspiracy theories like just everywhere, right? You can just open up any app and somebody's going to be talking about something that is either demonstrably not true or so speculative you can't even say it's true or not, right? So aliens kind of fall into that, and they also fall into other kinds of related conspiracies. If you think the government and the world order is real and Jewish people are hiding up, secrets and stuff, you may be more inclined to believe that, government is hiding aliens and stuff too, right? So there's also these crossbreeding between these different communities of folks that may have very disparate beliefs, but have related ways of thinking and related ways of communicating about the kinds of evidence that they have for these claims. So they're definitely having a field day this week. I was checking out the UFO Reddits and a bunch of other places, and everyone's just freaking out about this. I haven't seen a freak out about this since honestly ever, because it is a big deal. Talking about this in a congressional hearing, that's not nothing. But it kind of is nothing in a way, at least if you know what was actually said. So anyway, Zod, any comments about people being religious in this circumstance, or at least having some sort of mania?
I always hesitate a little bit to stretch the meaning of that word, but I do get where you're coming from with that. There's definitely a mentality that goes beyond just normal academic evidence-based curiosity, and you do get a very strong reaction when you oppose it. So I definitely think there's something that resembles religious fervor.
Yeah, religion is
certainly
an imprecise word there, but it's kind of it's a fervor. it's a fervor to
Yeah.
want it to be true. And anomaly. Oh, by the way, Dan, I think I didn't learn this until last week. I think they've changed it to unidentified anomalous phenomenon because that includes them going underwater and through mountains and in Walmart. It's anywhere they show up.
Yeah.
So aerial
In Walmart.
is now an obsolete term as far as I'm told. Well, people have been noting and believing weird things since there have been people. 500 years ago, anybody you ask would say, "Oh yes, witches can fly over houses and slide under doors." And 3,000 years ago, when a shepherd got struck by lightning, "Oh, that's the gods." And 20,000 years ago, when the volcano erupted, well, that's the spirit of the volcano. People have always come up with explanations for things they couldn't understand. And I think that's largely what's going on now. I saw something I couldn't identify. Aliens! It's aliens! So I just wish people would take a step back.
To be fair, right, the other there
Not to
were
mention,
three people that
2% of
testified at this
people
trial.
have
Only one of
schizophrenia.
them,
That's
I say trial, I
millions
say
of
hearing.
people.
Only one of them actually says aliens are a thing. The other two, the former pilots, were saying that they saw something that they couldn't identify, and they weren't.
And 90% of people have audio and visual hallucinations when sleep deprived. So
On the question of aliens, David Grush is the only guy that's actually saying it, and that's why he's making the headlines here, right? So even other people that are reporting on UAP phenomenon are not like the first to jump on this thing saying yeah, this is totally 100% non-human activity. They're just saying, look, there is this phenomenon that's happening, and I feel like my livelihood is threatened if I talk about it, and there should be some sort of methods to talk about. Half of the hearing was basically talking about, okay, how do we improve this? This is just like a policy thing, right? This is half of it was kind of like a PTA meeting in that sense. It's oh, okay, how do we come up with we're going to have this committee look at this committee look at this. I mean, that's what most congressional hearings are. The aliens part was just kind of the spice on this little hearing here. But
being able to
very
safely
interesting
report,
stuff.
being able to safely report, but not be in fear of your job on something you saw and couldn't identify, that's a great idea. No, that would help clear up a lot of misunderstandings and misreporting. But yes, I watched. I didn't watch as much as you did. I couldn't get through it, but I watched the boiled down version. And yeah, when he started talking about interdimensionality and stuff like that, I'm like, okay, you're just speculating. You're just speculating now. The three most important words for any skeptic, and I get this, I hear this every ACA broadcast. The three most important words a skeptic can keep in mind is, I don't know. I don't know. So if I see a large triangular object moving through the sky at night, I'm not going to go, oh, it's from Proxima Centauri. Oh, it's an alien. I'm going to say, I don't know what the fuck that was. I wish people would be more willing to say, I don't know what the fuck that was.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of it. And the people who actually saw things on the days that they're talking about at the hearing were saying that. David Grush, who actually hasn't seen anything himself, which he has admitted, is the one that's no, guys, it's actually aliens, which is really interesting. By the way, I mean, you are right in saying that, so the UAP thing is still the term that's being used, just to clarify on that as well, because a lot of people ask, why is that a thing? So there's an office within the United States that's called the Office of the Secretary of Defense, right? And in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, there is a task force. It used to be called the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force. It is now called the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. And David Grush was a part of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. So he has processed, some of these sightings and reports and presumably other things, right? And that's where part of his testimony is coming from. But he hasn't actually witnessed any of this stuff himself. And it is through his career that he has claimed that threats to his life, as well as threats to friends and family, have occurred. But again, no evidence besides his testimony about it so far. So we'll see if anything comes out of these private meetings and stuff. But I'm skeptical. I don't know if it's going to happen. Anyways, any other thoughts on this?
No, it just sounds like more of the same. I don't really think it adds up to much. I guess we'll see if he drops some bombshells in that little secret side room. Maybe it'll eventually come out, but until then, it just sounds like a lot of rumors. And I do think there should be a channel for people to report things that they think are weird. But if you escalate that to the point that you're running around talking about aliens and flying saucers and stuff, then you have to expect that's going to reflect on your professionalism a little bit, and people might respond appropriately.
Yeah.
It all depends on how the story is being represented and what actually happened.
For real. I think that's all that can really be said about that. Carlo, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Well, I wanted to explain my name, Carlo. That's from an old Outer Limits episode called Soldier, written by Harlan Ellison.
Adorable.
Guy from the future. Harlan Ellison actually sued Outer Limits because they sued James Cameron because he claimed that he stole the idea to make Terminator Orlo Cropregni, Arium TNDO. He was a soldier from the future that came back to our present, and he didn't have a good time. So anyway.
Well, that is a very random trivia fact.
I hope they're out there, but I'm not holding my breath. Life could be very rare, or we could be it. Everybody could have wiped each other out 500 million years ago. We could be the last remaining intelligent civilization. Nobody knows. I don't know. I don't know
either, Carlo. Thank you for calling in. Sorry to interrupt you there. Sometimes there's a bit of a delay between call and the host there. But yeah, thanks for calling in. And thank you for also giving what might be one of the most complicated backstories I've ever heard for a call name. That's a lot going on in there that I had no idea about. But Zod, you smiled. Have you seen what he's talking about, that Outer Limits episode?
No, I've heard a general backstory about him suing Outer Limits Terminator. I heard that had been accused of plagiarism, but I didn't know the rest of it about the Outer Limits and stuff.
Yeah, that's news to me, but I'm not surprised.
I know,
that,
right?
My general audience knows about these trivia matters, I guess. Not
it
trivial. I guess it is trivial, though. But that sounds so condescending when you say trivial. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, doesn't matter. Folks, this is a call-in show. We're going to keep taking calls. But before I get to the next call, I have to let you know that this week, if you're going to be in Austin, this weekend, rather, we are to be broadcasting live in the Free Thought Library for Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience. Talk Heathen is going to have a double trouble of two Jamies. We got Jamie Boone and new host Jamie the Blind Limey. So I don't know how they're going to differentiate on air, like which Jamie you're going to be talking to. I'm excited to find out, though. So that's going to be funny. And hey, if you like my face, I'm going to be on Atheist Experience with Christy Powell that day. So doors open at noon. And of course, it is completely free. So if you're in Austin, come on by, and would love to meet you for that. And also, there's going to be an awesome experience. It's something that the ACA tries to do every year. It's the annual back cruise that's happening Saturday, August 26th this year. So basically, what a back cruise is you show up on a boat and you go down Austin in the river and you see some bats come out from the Congress Avenue Bridge, which is really cool. And there's going to be a lot of cool ACA personalities there, like Forrest Valkai and J-Mike and a bunch of other hosts. I am not going to be able to make it this year, unfortunately. I usually try to go, but I actually had some other plans that I have to attend to. But yeah, come on down. It's going to be at Lady Bird Lake. And I think there's still a couple of tickets left, but the tickets are definitely, I think, within the single digits now. So you should definitely jump on that if you haven't already. Link to that's going to be in the description. So yeah, with that done, let's keep going with the next one. I think is also interesting. We're going to talk to Brant calling in from Wisconsin. Brant, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hello. I'm looking to talk about Thomas Ligotti's Conspiracy Against the Human Race. Have you ever heard of that book before?
I have, and I have actually read it. I've read, I didn't finish it, but I do have it. It's on my Kindle, and I've read through about half of it. I should have finished it, though. It is a very interesting book, but what about that book did you want to talk about?
Everybody's talking about conspiracies, and I think the conspiracy he brings up is just a conspiracy of like existential dread, the lack of meaning, addiction to life, and this like desire to perpetuate it to create our own meanings. And I feel like, as you said, we should be more skeptical about bringing people. Like, we should be more skeptical. Like, bringing people into the world is a very complex decision, and there's like a lot of things that are involved in that are like very painful for people and complex and desire upsetting and just full of existential dread. And I feel like people just don't want to talk about like the horrors that you could potentially face in life. Skull crushing is one of the things that he mentions in the book. Um,
Yeah,
so it's like, yeah, I just
yeah.
wanted
Like
to
I said,
bring the real.
I didn't finish. Sorry. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you there, Brant. But yeah, I didn't finish the book, but I thought it was very interesting. Thomas Ligatti's sort of philosophy, he talks about these very existential themes, right? And when this title, Conspiracy Against the Human Race, is kind of this idea of saying, look, the real truths about the world are really dark, right? There may be no purpose to life. We may be evolving towards nowhere, and there's nowhere that we're going to go when we die, right? And all that is like very hard to swallow for most people. So we kind of come up with these other kinds of ideas and sort of lie to ourselves about life having this meaning and there being grand narratives and these purposes, even though none of that may be true. And he even goes as far as to say, if I recall, that voluntary human extinction might be like, the most ethical thing we can do, although obviously a very unlikely thing for us to happen,
Oh
right?
yeah, I
And so these ideas are really interesting. I like reading. Yeah, I like reading books on existential philosophy, especially stuff that's as pessimistic as Ligatti is. If you're interested in the history of pessimism and philosophy, it all goes back to Schopenhauer, really. But I mean, Nietzsche has talked about this. Lots of folks who've talked about human society and this idea that there are these kinds of fundamental truths that the denial of or acceptance of will completely change the course of human history. And Ligatti's whole point, if I recall, is, yeah, it's kind of like a conspiracy. It's kind of like these ideas are just so harmful towards human psychology that it's almost not even worth thinking about.
Yeah.
And so what do we do with that? And I think there's some merit to like, look, maybe there is some things that we can just kind of have, even if they're not true. There is something to that. I'm not going to say that, like, look, every single person on earth has to think the exact same way I do about afterlives and about gods and things like that. I understand that maybe these things aren't literally true, but there might be some value in even contemplating these ideas and maybe even in believing them. That being said, though, the real criticisms I have when we talk about these ideas is the institutions behind them. In other words, the folks that are making huge decisions that affect everybody's lives based on their beliefs, right? I mean, that's why organizations like the ACA exist, is to talk about the separation of religion and government. I'm not here to say, yeah, if your grandmother died at a funeral, you should tell your parents and say like, well, actually, God's not real. So the fact that you're praying about it is really kind of dumb. Like, that's just kind of cringe, right? Like, you don't want to be that guy. But it's more just like, okay, there are some truths that I'm going to have to accept if I want to live an honest life for myself and for the folks around me. And they may be hard to swallow, but like that's what we're given, right? But anyway, am I doing a fair summary of it, Brant? Because like I said, I didn't finish the book, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, you're doing a fair summary of it. I think a lot of what also kind of gets into it is like as you said, with religion, people do have them as kind of like a coping mechanism of sorts. Like when you face these existential dreads, like the potential that there could be like no meaning in life, and like you face all this pain and frustration of desires constantly on like the daily basis throughout your life, and people have to cope with that in some ways. So it's a natural thing to turn to religion, to turn to spirituality, to turn to, and basically anything you can turn to as a coping mechanism, to like friends, family, so on and so forth, hobbies. Just to basically distract yourselves from the pain. And he kind of gets into how there's like distraction mechanisms that we use, the bunch of different mechanisms that people use to basically cope with things. And I think, as you said, like you mentioned that like your problem is like with religion isn't the fact that it's like they're having a wrong knowledge. Because wrong knowledge is inherently harmful. you could believe grass grows at 2 inches per second, and that's completely wrong. This doesn't go that fast, but it's not going to harm you to like have that wrong fact. But what you just think is bad is that there's harms that come with the institutions, such as like taking away women's reproductive rights and stuff like that, which I 100% agree is harmful.
I think,
so I think
that's
that
go ahead. Sorry.
An imposition that like is also just harmful and is like the problem for that brings about all these harms that like are potential is birth, as Thomas Ligotti brings up, potentials and all these things, all these struggles and existential things that we face.
I'll be honest, Brant. One of the reasons why I read Thomas Ligotti's book is he's one of the only modern writers that I know about that has talked extensively about antinatalism. And longtime listeners of the show know I'm very sympathetic towards an antinatalist view. But that is, neither here nor there. I want to let Zod chime in on this conversation. Zod, I know you haven't probably read this book, but,
Yeah, I've been a little quiet because I just simply don't really know what the book's about, and I don't want to speak out of turn. But I think what I'm hearing is that there can be advantage to religion or a positive function to it, just as a way to help us cope with existential dread or with just the big, I don't know, all the problems in the universe can kind of come down on you and feel crushing. And I guess if you try to think of the sum total of your life and how small you are in the universe and all the bad things that are going to happen to you and how short your life is, that can just feel overwhelming. Is that kind of the crux of the problem, roughly speaking?
I think Ligotti's book, again, this is from reading it, I don't know how long ago, but less than a year ago, was look, life is suffering, basically. Like, there's a lot of reasons to be pessimistic about conscious existence. It may be the case that life is more suffering than it is pleasure, at least for some people, right? And so we have to cope with that. We have to deal with that potential reality. And he mostly talks about that and talks about the ways in which people cope. But in reality, at least according to his worldview, is that we may have nothing to do with this. This is, again, in sort of the vein of pessimistic philosophy, which, again, I talk about Arthur Schopenhauer. Arthur Schopenhauer also wrote about this, right? He talks about the will, right? He talks about people's will and saying, the will is just going to want things, and you're always going to want things, right? The hedonistic treadmill is always going to be there, and we may never be satisfied. So it's kind of an extension of that idea.
I think I take this is presenting kind of what could be an artificial dichotomy, unless I'm misunderstanding part of the book. But I think an artificial dichotomy could be taken from this between accepting full-on religious factual delusions about the world and our place in it, what happens after we die. And then on the other hand, constantly staring in the face every possible bit of existential dread you could focus on, or constantly thinking about all these big negative questions. If you really sit there and think about the actual facts of life and dwell on that and carry it with you every day, that could feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I think there is a place in the middle where you can just focus on the good in life. You can kind of know that's there and pack it away. And that can become a form of subconscious delusion. And I would say it probably is even for me. I don't sit there and think about all the terrible things that are going to happen and how soon I'm probably going to die and my parents are going to die and all that kind of stuff. That's all true. And I don't try to deny it through some kind of conjecture about the afterlife or spiritual meaning. But I do let myself focus on what today's like, probably take more joy in my current situation than maybe I would if I were thinking about all the morbid details of life. And I think to that extent, I might delude myself a little bit, but I don't delude myself to the fact that it steers my life in a weird direction or allows for weird theological rules or impositions and things like that. So I think just speaking really roughly, I think there is a middle ground, and there are kind of innocent ways to slightly delude yourself and kind of know you're doing it, which I do on a daily basis, to be honest.
Yeah, one of the things Ligotti gets into is that we have to constantly delude ourselves. Otherwise, we're basically going to go mad, or we have to be like extremely sadistic, because just the phones and the computers that we're using to communicate with each other right now have the lithium batteries are mined by slave labor, basically. I mean, Like the diets we eat, even if you're a vegan of sorts, like you're gonna be getting some extent or another, like animals ground up in the field and stuff like that. Like no matter what, we're contributing to
True.
mass amounts of suffering. As Schopenhauer points out, when the lion tears apart the gazelle is experiencing far more suffering than the lion is experiencing pleasure. And it's the same for all
Hmm.
experiences of death and consumption. So if you have to constantly tune yourself out to reality, otherwise it's extremely maddening. Uh, and people just it's the nature of reality is like billions of years of evolution programmed into us, so we do have these abilities to tune this out. So we are kind of not really solipsistic, but kind of in a way like stuck in our own minds. We don't like we have like a level of empathy that's kind of developed through like in the human species, but even then it's
Yeah.
not like you can look at like people who are like really empathetic, like truly just like really empathetic, and just they get torn apart. Like a lot of them commit suicide and stuff. And when it comes down to
Sure.
it, like you have to be really, really, really tuned out to reality, I think, in order to like be able to not be depressed, or you have to have a level of like sadism, I think, to some extent or another.
Yeah. I am of a similar thought process. I have referenced David Benatar's work, Never to Have Been, who talks about this idea. In the beginning of his book, he's like, well, human beings have a psychological bias to basically say that things are fine and things are okay and normal when really it's not, right? Like we may have a bias to try to find the positivity in ourselves and in the world when it may just be objectively false, right? It just may not be true. And if you're someone like me who is also sympathetic to this overall idea of a negative utilitarian point of view, which is like suffering, the conscious diminishing of suffering is more important than the active gain of pleasure,
Yeah, I'm a
then
pretty
yeah, that's going to
negative
comport to your
utilitarian.
worldview. Yeah. I mean, I am sympathetic to that, but I mean, to Zod's point, if Zod just doesn't think that way, he's just not going to think that way, right? Like, if he doesn't, then I don't know. His worldview is just going to be different. This is kind
To
of the
me,
problem of
to me, it seems
moral philosophy,
it seems
right?
odd though, because
What you're,
to me it seems like experience generates value, like empirical value is generated from like our experiences. Like pain does have
yeah,
value, and it is like an extremely visceral negative, and the heights of pain
sure,
are more visceral than the heights of pleasure, and it seems very demonstrable to like to experience that. Like if you could like
sure.
have like $1 million and push a button, but then a nail would just like shove right through your hand, like tear down your arm, and the doctor would be right there just like repair it up, and you'd be completely fine within an hour. Like logically speaking, $1 million and you're gonna be completely fine in an hour. But that pain is just so visceral and so like intense and just so opposed to like our biological like programming, that's just like it's hard to deny that like even if you philosophically are like, no, I don't think that pain is like that terrible. I think like it's worth it to endure pain for the goods, or like pain equals gain or whatever. Like I feel like no, it's there's something about pain that's just visceral and true that like just makes so it's like inherently universally valued as like a for
Yeah,
subjects. You know what I mean?
yeah. I totally get you. Listen, we do have to wrap up this call because we got some other folks that want to talk to
I
us.
got
But
you.
in short, Brand, I am very sympathetic to those ideas personally, and I understand that others may not. Zod may have other, counter arguments he wants to bring here. But look, yeah, I think in short, there is a lot of suffering in life, and we may delude ourselves to thinking that, like, look, there's some good things in the world, and maybe that makes up for all the bad things. I'm not sure if that's true, and that's just like a really hard pill for most people to swallow. But at least from my point of view, yeah, that might be the case if we look at the aggregate suffering of not just human beings, but any beings that are conscious enough to experience this subjective feeling of pain. It may outweigh the good. But that fact alone isn't going to stop me from living right now. And I guess I'm going to hang my hat on that so I could, keep on doing what I'm doing. But Brent, I appreciate you calling, and I appreciate you bringing up that book. I'm glad it's.
We go. What's going? I'm in kicked off the show. Boom, boom, boom. History. Bam, bam.
That book, I'm glad it's a book that I've actually read, or at least partially read, so that I can have something to say about it, because it's a good one. I would say people go check it out if you're interested. Thomas Ligotti, Conspiracy Against the Human Race, if you like that sort of thing. But yeah,
I would like to add, I'm not like flatly philosophically against exploring any of these ideas he's talking about.
Sure.
I'm just describing that there is a middle ground where you can cope. I think you have to find a way to engage with these ideas enough to make life real and to function in it and to kind of be prepared for what's going to happen. Also to be decent enough to the living beings, whether it's animals or people around you. You got to find a way to engage with that enough without it becoming debilitating.
Yeah.
And how you do that is one of the trickier questions in life, I think.
Yeah. So that's going to be all the time we have for that call. Thanks again for calling in on that. We're going to just quickly jump to the next call. I'm not sure if this is actually the person.
Well, people in the comment section don't seem to get it.
Calling in right now, but I'm going to talk to anyway.
But,
is this Baked Alaska calling in from New York? Like the Baked Alaska?
not the one. If you're thinking of the infamous streamer Baked Alaska.
Okay. Because I kind of freaked out for a little bit there. I was like, is Baked Alaska actually calling into Truth Wanted right now? But I guess it's a different Baked Alaska. Okay. Whew. Gave me a fucking heart attack there, dude. What the fuck?
It's my favorite dessert. In fact, I never would have picked this username if I had known about that individual. But it is my favorite ice cream, and so I've just stuck with it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's Baked Alaska. For those of you who don't know, that's a whole other story. But if you want to know about like very big anti-Semitic people on the internet right now, like doing crazy stuff, like go look up Baked Alaska, because that's a whole other thing. But anyway, other Baked Alaska, what do you got for us today?
Yeah, what's up, man? So I've been engaging with some of the wise souls in your chat, as I often do when I listen to the show. I always enjoy listening in and engaging with the people in the chat. There tends to be sometimes this thread, and I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on it, that basically theists don't have any evidence for God's existence. A lot of people seem to take that view.
Well, I do gotta go to a friend's house to watch a film,
but
so
I'm
I'm
gonna
dip.
Do you
But
guys
I'm
agree
glad I
with
could
some
go
of
on the
more
call.
hardliners in the chat, or do you think there are some good reasons for believing, but you're just not convinced?